Welcome, Week 11, running backs we're talking now. But before we get there, I want to tell you about promo code CURVE at rotocurve.com. You get all kinds of good things with it, things like exclusive position rankings, projections, premium cheat sheets, that sort of stuff. Must-have DFS tools like DVP rankings, points per attempt, red zone. You get optimized lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel. You get access to player ownership percentage. So go ahead and check that out for $5 instead of the $7 that you would usually pay if you didn't use that promo code CURVE. Jim, we're talking running backs this week. I'm seeing what you got up your sleeve here because it's not like last week. It's not loaded with the absolute studs where we were just, looking at the 6,000 and above tier. We've got value and plays all over the place in terms of pricing.
We do. If I can find the room, I think there are enough values at receiver. And like we said, we just had a section on quarterbacks where we're mostly paying down. And in cash, we're comfortable with guys like Cousins and Bortles who will allow us to allocate more resources to these skill positions. So I don't mind being chalky and going all the way up for Le'Veon Bell. He can be my Antonio Brown, in the sense that the one guy that I'll just completely pay up for. I mean, there's a positive correction coming in the touchdown department for this guy. I wouldn't be surprised with the multi-touchdown game, in this setup. I mean, there's no one to vulture his scores right now. Toussaint's not going to come in and take them. I know you got to really pay up a premium here, but at the same time, he's commensurate right now with what Odell Beckham and Brown and even like Mike Evans cost. So, I mean, I know it's tough to swallow, but it's the same price we've been paying for months for these receivers, And the cost certainty with a guy who's going to get 20-plus touches, who leads the, what's he have, 135 total yards per game, something crazy like that. And the Browns are just the team for him to get right against. The touchdown rate hasn't been there. Like I said, it's going to come. They've allowed the second most rushing yards in the league. They've allowed the second most rushing touchdowns. You don't need to oversell that. I just think that's a guy that you can put in your corner in cash games, and you're going to get, you're expecting 21 to 25 fantasy points as your floor almost, and then anything above that would just be gravy. Just because between the receptions and the yards, he might get you 20 points alone. The other guys, I have two more guys. The one that's obvious, he's chalky, it's LeGarrette Blount. I just think, we've been talking about how he's touchdown dependent. I understand that, but I think he's fourth in the league in carries per game. Like this idea that we've seen this variant Bill Belichick play, kind of game script. It's true in the sense that over the years we've seen that, but this year, even with Brady, this guy's averaging 20 carries a game. And more importantly, even against a team in Seattle, he's dominating those valuable goal line, touches. And if Gronk is out, which is looking, more and more likely, goal line carries are even more going to be more valuable and more incented for Blount on a team that really doesn't have, outside of Bennett, doesn't really have another red zone threat. That's kind of anecdotal. The real point is Blount, San Francisco, it could be fun. And also, Blunts in San Francisco are fun. I've done that before. But LaShawn McCoy is a guy that I'm also building around. Again, the same argument. He's a little bit more expensive than Blount, but if I was going to pivot from Bell, I wouldn't mind having a backfield of McCoy and Blount. The Bengals used to have this reputation as a tough defense. It's not true this year. Vontaze Burfict isn't playing that well. Atkins is a really good pass rushing guy, but he's not a big defensive tackle. I think people that's a misnomer a little bit. Geno is an undersized tackle. You can run on this Bengals team. They're giving up 4.4 yards per carry. They've given up, the ninth most rushing yards in the league. So it's not a tough setup. He's one of only 7 backs averaging over 100 yards, from scrimmage. He's going to get, 19 to 22 touches. That's what he gets every week. And the passing usage is helpful too. So I just think, a total package kind of player, a touchdown makes it gravy, but he can meet costs without it like Bell can. And there's only a few guys in the league that I'm, the David Johnsons, LaShawn McCoys, the guys who I'm comfortable can get their 5 and 6 catches, their 120 total yards, and still get me 17 to 18 fantasy points. And then any touchdowns just make it, profit.
Yeah, you're again reading off my list, but I won't hold it against you this week. Those are some pretty good options. I think Le'Veon Bell, like you mentioned, in my projections, I have him above and beyond number one. If you're spending up for someone, I think you can spend up for multiple guys this week. Yeah. But if you're just spending up for one person in cash games, it's got to be Le'Veon Bell. Guy's just crazy involved. in the passing game. He's basically a wide receiver 2, almost bordering on wide receiver 1 in terms of targets. So I definitely love him. I like the setup for LaShawn McCoy. I like LeGarrette Blount, but there are some guys that I would not feel too bad pivoting to in cash. First one is CJ Prosise, and I know people are going to say that Thomas Rawls is back and maybe he's going to take some of his role, but he's still reasonably cheap enough where I don't think Rawls is going to come back in. And with the way Prosise played last week, over 150 yards from scrimmage, I don't think it's going to be, just the Rawls show. At worst, I think we have a 50-50 split. At best, I still think we have 70-30 Prosise. And this is the guy who's catching passes, and he's still, not overly expensive. I think there's a scenario where they cut Christian Michael because they feel really good about Prosise as the guy, and maybe they're just posturing with Rawls. We'll see. Maybe it turns into a 50-50 split, but regardless, I mean, especially on DraftKings with the PPR, it's pretty clear Prosise is the one with the skill set that we are more interested in. Another guy is Todd Gurley. This Miami team, Melvin Gordon put in a pretty good outing against them last week, but it was mostly from the passing game. So that's a little worrying, except for the fact that you look at Gurley's numbers over, the past 4 weeks, he's caught at least 4 passes in 3 of them. So he is getting involved there. I think he's just too talented to stay down for as long as he's stayed down. And now his price has shrunk to probably the lowest it's going to be throughout the course of the year. I mean, we're talking $6,700 on FanDuel. And on DraftKings, it's even more affordable than that. I will get it up in 1 second. $5,000. So that is just, rock bottom for a guy who started the year at, Le'Veon Bell pricing. So I think this is the time to buy Gurley, even in cash games. And the last guy I would say for DraftKings specifically is Rashad Jennings, who I mentioned. I know, say that again?
Under $4,000, isn't it? 3,500 or something?
Yeah, 3,600. And I know you look at his overall numbers, he's gone over 27 yards rushing twice. So I know that looks ugly and feels ugly. But if the Bears offense really are not going to have control of the ball, there are going to be more opportunities for him. And, the Bears rushing defense is good, not great. But last week, I mean, this is as good as it's gotten for Jennings. 87 yards rushing. He caught the ball 3 times. So we're talking 18 touches. Perkins doesn't seem to be eating into his workload as much as we thought he would. If he's going to be involved in the passing game, we know he's the goal line back as well. I think for 3,600, if you need to punt a spot, you could do worse than Jennings. I think Jennings and Prosise are guys that people are going to save for tournaments, but I think they both could be cash viable as well. Now let's talk tournaments because we mentioned a lot of guys for cash. I think there are a lot of options this week. Who would you turn to in tournaments? I know you got your big 3 for cash, so who you got for GPP?
Yeah, Prosise in that cash group. I mean, that tournament group, in the sense that, for one thing I do agree with you is that he's built to be an every down back. There's this misconception that I think when a guy comes out and he's like labeled receiving back, people automatically think he's isolated, change of pace, skill set. And he's like 6 foot 220. This isn't a small guy. He's basically the size of Ryan Matthews. I think he physically compares to like Devontae Booker, Tevin Coleman on Mock Draftable. So this isn't a small guy per se. And he also has some jets. He's like 77th percentile in the 40. And also last year he led college football in yards per route run. So this is a guy who's obviously has the skill set. He's talented in the receiving game. I think it's important to also mention, just to pump him up, is the fact that not only does Sheil Kapadia, who's probably one of the most tapped-in beat writers, he thinks he's going to lead the team in carries and thinks there's a seed shift that's happened here. He thinks there's something happening here where this is the feature back. I think it's also important to note that, adjusting for game flow, the Seahawks are the 5th pass heaviest team in the league. So he's going to continue to get these receptions. Some other guys that I like in tournaments, let's look. I had it written here. I like Theo Riddick, actually. Just in terms of I don't really trust the floor too much. He doesn't really have much in terms of rushing here, but I do think there's a potential here in a shootout for him to be in that, that 6 to 8 reception range. Can get another one of these like big kind of games. If he finds the end zone, he's really their only option, too, in the red zone in terms of these short passes. So we've actually seen some scoring rise for him. But, yeah, I mean, those are the guys that I like in terms of going up. And also, I'm willing to pay up for DeMarco Murray a little bit, too, in a tournament. I like his profile in tournaments more than I do in cash. I just think, he's been so valuable each week, and a multi-score game is always within reason. That's if you're going to pivot off of Mariota. I wouldn't do a team stack with them. I don't think there's enough room. Who are some tournament backs that you like? Because I'm interested to hear that.
Murray's definitely one of them. If we're going Mariota and cash, I mean, Murray had a nice game against that Colts team last time. You are able to run on them, that's for sure. So I definitely like DeMarco Murray. The Colts are a team that also, passing backs have been pretty successful against. So I think Murray could get involved in the screen game. I definitely like him there. You hit the nail on the head with Riddick. There was another guy I was on because Jacksonville ranks first in passing DVOA to running backs, which is not a good setup for him, but they also have allowed something like 26. I was trying to find the stat, 26 big plays on offense, which ranks about, it's like 10th. So their offense has given up a fair share of them. And we know that, Riddick is explosive. So there still is a possibility. And I'm not sold that, first against receiving backs is going to hold true against a guy like him. For the guy who should lead the position in receiving, maybe other than Le'Veon Bell, he's still underpriced. Another guy I liked was Spencer Ware. I mean, this Kansas City offense is kind of standing out to me this week, where Tampa Bay's allowed the 7th most fantasy points to the position. I mean, last week, honestly, Jordan Howard was looking good against him, and he got benched, I think. They call it an injury, but he fumbled, and then he only saw like one touch. He did come back in the game, by the way. He saw another touch, but they said it was, I think Fox called it an Achilles injury, and they asked Howard, and they said, what was he? He goes, "I'm good, man." That's all he said. So to me, that screams, Fox was behind this, and it really wasn't an injury, and it was, benching your better player because of a fumble, which I continue to hate in football, honestly. I mean, you saw the way the Bears offense stalled out after that. Cutler was just under siege. There was nothing they could do because they weren't running their best player on offense, and it was just annoying. So Spencer Ware, I think if they're going to, rely on him early and often, he could have those 40 yards in the first quarter like Howard has and then build on them. So I definitely like him. And other guys I'm looking at, Isaiah Crowell. The Steelers team has already allowed 10 rushing touchdowns. So it's pretty clear who their goal line back is. I mean, Crowell's cheap enough. He's under 4,000 on DraftKings, where really you just need him to get his normal workload and find the end zone for him to turn out to be, tournament friendly. But I think this is a game that could, at home and division game, they could be more competitive than you think. And usually when this team has a nice game, we could see Crowell finding the end zone more than once. I'd say if there was a bold call for me this week, it'd be 2 Isaiah Crowell touchdowns. So that's definitely a guy that I'm going to be going to in tournaments. And then I think, if you don't feel good about Procise or Jennings, this is the format you could definitely, stomach them out in. But besides that, I think we pretty much covered. I mean, Le'Veon Bell's a guy, like I said, going to be using everywhere. So there's a lot of, guys I'll be using in both formats. But if you're going to mix and match, I think the Wares, the Murrays, the Crowells of the world are worth doing it. Did we miss anything at running back this week?
There's one dark one that I actually little feedback there. It would be Kenneth Dixon. I just think there's an increased upside here. Last week, 80 total yards. Each week we've seen him etch more and more into the snap rate. Each successive week more touches. I think a transition could be underway. Again, they could be stubborn, and we could not see it happen this year. But I also just think game script wise, if we're going to predict game flow at all, this is Baltimore going in to face the top offense in the league, most points per drive, best running team. I know Dallas controls the clock, but I think that also could create some desperation late in the game for Baltimore. Those late drive, I think it could be one of these Danny Woodhead type games in the sense that, Dixon could have nothing going into the third quarter, and then, through the mid-third and through the fourth, he could have 6 to 8 catches, that kind of thing. So I just think if you're going to afford your Le'Veon Bells and afford paying up, even if you're going to do a stack in a tournament with, say, Bell and Brown, I think you can vibe, or Beckham and Le'Veon Bell. You can pay down for a Procise, or you can even go cheaper into that Rashad Jennings kind of Kenneth Dixon range.
Yeah, and one final name I want to throw out there because they do rank 28th in DVOA against receiving backs is TJ Yeldon. I think if we think that Bortles is going to be throwing a lot, then Yeldon's been a guy who's been lining up as both a back and a receiver lately, which has been interesting. They've kind of been going Le'Veon Bell-ish with him. And this is a team that can't cover backs and really struggle to cover with secondary receivers. So I think TJ Yeldon's a guy who quietly, his price is down to 3,500 on DraftKings. Could have one of those Darren Sproles type games, and who knows? Maybe he breaks a long one against a bad defense. I think we could be looking at 6 reception type game, which for 3,500, if he does find a way to find the end zone, would be useful. He's a guy that I think is one tournament share is good, but I think he has some nice upside here. But that's all for backs for us. But before we go, promo code Curve saves you $2 on a weekly premium membership. You get, the optimized lineups, the must-have tools like DVP, points per attempt, that kind of stuff, access to player ownership percentage. You get rankings, projections, and cheat sheets. So go ahead and check out promo code Curve. Pay 5 instead of 7. Stay tuned. We still got some wide receivers and some stacks to talk about this week.